Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that is, honestly, deeply fascinating and incredibly empowering. It's all about Self Ruqyah. You know, if you've ever felt physically unwell or just spiritually heavy, and there's no clear medical reason for it, well, the classical and contemporary Islamic sources we're unpacking today offer a really powerful, super accessible tool for exactly that. And the best part? This isn't about hunting down some mysterious healer. Nope. It's a completely practical, step-by-step method you can literally do yourself to safeguard your physical and spiritual well-being.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. First, we'll cover what self-ruqyah actually is. Then we'll look at the synergy between spiritual and medical treatments. After that, we'll walk through a step-by-step guide, followed by how to make ruqyah water. Then we'll break down the critical difference between permissible and forbidden practices, and finally, we'll wrap up with maintaining your daily spiritual health.
All right, moving into section 1, what exactly is self-ruqyah?
So it's a super common human experience, right, to face unexplained distress. Maybe it's persistent anxiety, sudden mood swings, or an illness your doctors just can't seem to figure out. Well, according to the foundational texts, self-ruqyah is basically defined as the act of reciting specific verses from the Quran, along with authentic supplications, over yourself for healing and protection. And what is so beautiful about this is that it's just a simple sunnah practice. You can literally do this at home, all by yourself. You absolutely don't need a specialized spiritual guru or a middleman. It's really all about taking personal responsibility for your own spiritual well-being.
And this whole concept, it is deeply anchored right in the Quran itself. In Surah Al-Isra, verse 82, it says, "And we send down of the Quran that which is a healing and a mercy to those who believe." The texts really emphasize that this is absolutely not just a metaphor. The words themselves are viewed by scholars as an explicit divine medicine. It's quite literally designed by Allah to bring real, tangible relief to the believer.
Okay, on to section 2, spiritual and medical synergy. Now, a question that comes up a lot these days is that classic dilemma, faith versus science. If you're sick, do you just pray, or do you go straight to the doctor? And this brilliantly illustrates the classical Islamic perspective because it's actually never an either-or scenario. Spiritual means, like the Quran, dua, and ruqyah, are entirely meant to be combined with physical means, like going to the doctor, taking your meds, and getting some rest. The texts stress over and over that Muslims must utilize halal medical treatments right alongside their spiritual trust. They work completely in harmony. You take the medicine because, well, it's a practical physical step, but you retain that full trust that the ultimate healing, that comes from Allah.
All right, section 3, the step-by-step guide. I really want you to pay close attention here because these are highly actionable, incredibly practical steps that you can start using today, all based on the prophetic tradition. So preparation is key. First things first, you purify your intention, your niyyah. You have to recognize that you are seeking healing from Allah alone. Second, perform wudu. The sources actually note that starting in a state of physical and spiritual purity brings these profound blessings and immediate protection. And finally, if you can, face the Qibla. It's the sunnah when making supplication, so it's highly recommended.
So, once you're prepared, what do you actually recite? Well, the texts highlight a specific toolkit of core verses. Surah Al-Fatiha is described as the absolute ultimate essence of healing. Scholars actually call it the Ruqyah of Ruqyah. Then you have Ayat al-Kursi and the last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which offer immense protection. And then, of course, the 3 Quls, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas. The sources make it super clear that these 3 short chapters act as your ultimate everyday shield against unseen harms.
Now, what's really interesting here is the specific physical method used by the Prophet Muhammad. It is so practical. He would put his palms together, blow into them, recite the verses, and then wipe over his body 3 times. And there's this fascinating scholarly nuance pointed out by Sheikhs Albani and Ibn Uthaymin. They noted that blowing into your hands before reading is primarily meant for protection. But if you're trying to cure an active affliction, you actually blow after reading. It's a very precise, intentional methodology.
Which brings us to section 4, making ruqyah water.
Let's look at how you can take this spiritual practice of recitation and extend it into a tangible, consumable daily routine. Honestly, the process is surprisingly simple. You just open a container of clean water, and hey, this can be standard tap water, spring water, or ideally, Zamzam water if you happen to have it. You hold it near your mouth, recite those core verses we just talked about, and then gently blow into the water right after you finish reciting. And just like that, your ruqyah water is ready to go.
So how do you actually use it? The text recommends simply drinking it throughout the day. You can also use it for bathing. Some practitioners specifically recommend doing this on Mondays and Thursdays, which perfectly aligns with the Sunnah fasting days. You can even do this exact same recitation over extra virgin olive oil and massage it into painful areas on your body. And yeah, you can totally add honey or natural sea salt to these routines as well. The main takeaway from the sources here is that the barakah, the divine blessing of those recited words, actively remains in the water or the oil as you consume or apply it.
Moving right along to Section 5, permissible versus forbidden ruqyah.
So the crucial point here is that the texts establish absolute, non-negotiable boundaries to safeguard your faith. Knowing the difference is critical. Lawful ruqyah relies strictly on the Quran, authentic supplications, clear Arabic words, and full, unwavering trust in Allah. Forbidden ruqyah, that strays right into the realm of magic and charlatans. If someone is handing you amulets, murmuring weird, unclear words, burying random objects in the dirt, or writing broken letters on white porcelain just to dissolve them in water, no way. The sources explicitly categorize these as completely forbidden practices and shirk. The true sunnah is pure, it's clear, and it's simple.
And finally, Section 6, maintaining daily spiritual health.
You see, ruqyah isn't just some emergency button you slam and things go wrong. It's really about long-term maintenance. To grasp just how deeply rooted this idea is, we look to this famous work, The Disease and the Cure, by the classical scholar Imam Ibn al-Qayyim. The sources we're exploring today draw heavily from this tradition. It highlights that recognizing our own internal spiritual diseases, things like envy, anxiety, or feeling distance from faith, and then seeking lawful scriptural cures for them is a highly respected, necessary Islamic science. It requires patience, super sincere intention, and building consistent daily habits.
We're going to conclude our explainer with this one thought. The sources make it absolutely, abundantly clear, true healing requires both the physical effort of seeking medical treatment and the profound spiritual trust in Allah as the ultimate healer. They're basically two wings of the exact same bird. So ask yourself, which wing are you neglecting today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and stay focused.